7.
Now, the assassination of Conservative commentator Charlie Kirk has sent shockwaves across America, indeed across the globe. The 31-year-old influencer was widely credited with attracting younger voters to the Republican Party. He was shot in the neck while addressing students during the first day of his national tour of colleges. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the name, he was a skilled debater who was thought to be a key advisor to the Trump administration. Here's a little of Charlie Kirk in action.
Do you think men can give birth?
I think that...
yes or no question?
I think that a person who is assigned male at birth, I don't think they
assigned male at birth? So people are not male at birth?
I think that a person...
See, your evidence that college is a scam, my friend.
So what do you say in some cases women with IUDs are murderers?
Of course not, they're not murderers.
So what's the difference between an IUD killing a conceived zygote and like a mother going to Planned Parenthood and killing the fetus in her womb?
That was actually the best point somebody made.
It's not about the cells. It's not about... No, I'm speaking. 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 No, I'm speaking.
Want to say one more time?
No, I'm speaking.
Hello, everyone. I am Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, and I am surrounded by 20 woke college kids. What's her greatest accomplishment as vice president?
Being the first female all-black president. We've never had that
No,
before.
I got that, but what's her accomplishment that made people's lives better?
I don't know. Vice presidents don't really do much, to be honest.
Can you name one thing she's done that's good?
No, probably not. That is an amazing
As of the timing of this filming, can you name me how many times she sat down for an interview?
I think that is a very weird point to make. Why would I count how many times Kamala Harris has had an interview?
Because she refuses to take questions from the press and media? Shouldn't you do that if you're the sitting vice president?
John McGuirk from Gript joins me now. John, good morning to you. And we don't seem to have... Oh, now let's go with that. John, good morning to you.
Fran, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine now. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. For an Irish audience, John, who mightn't be all that familiar with Charlie Kirk, how important was he as a figure in conservative America?
I think that the simplest way to explain that is that he was shot on a college campus surrounded by tens of thousands of cheering fans. Now, anybody who knows anything about the culture in America politically will know that college campuses have always been the preserve of the Democratic Party and the political left. Charlie Kirk was somebody who devoted his life really from the age of 18 to going onto those college campuses and taking a conservative message to students. And President Trump himself had credited him last year with the fact that during the election against Kamala Harris, it was the first time in a generation that a Republican had won the votes of people aged between 18 and 24. And President Trump himself had said Charlie Kirk was the reason why that happened, because he was the one who was taking the message in the United States to young people in particular. He was only 31 years of age. He had 2 young children and a beautiful young wife when he was so tragically assassinated yesterday.
His skill as a debater and an orator, it was considerable, wasn't it?
He was. He had that ability. I mean, one of the things that I think is so ironic about his assassination is that his particular method of communication was to engage in what used to be called the Socratic method, where he would actually go into college campuses and invite people to ask him questions and tell him why he was wrong. And so he didn't. A lot of people who engage in political debates, if you think in Ireland in political parties, they go and they address their own supporters or they make a speech. Charlie Kirk would go into universities. He would sit down with liberal students and he would say, tell me what I'm wrong about. And then he would engage them in debate in a particularly fearless way. He was an incredibly talented and skilled debater, but also somebody whose communication style, while regularly blunt and regularly controversial, was never disrespectful. And I think that won him a lot of admirers. He was just one of those communicators that comes along every now and again that when he talks, you listen, even if you disagree with him. And that's why I think he attracted so much attention.
His importance to the Trump victory, for example, how would you rate that, John?
I would think, in 2 ways. First of all, he was incredibly influential on President Trump. So President Trump himself has said, I think, that it was Charlie Kirk who recommended the selection of J.D. Vance as vice president. He was somebody who was in the White House multiple times a week, and was one of the few people. Donald Trump is, of course, famously quite a prickly character. Charlie Kirk was reputedly one of the very few people who could go into the Oval Office and tell President Trump that he's completely wrong about something. and Trump would listen, which I think is a testament to his influence. But then also as a communicator and being a sort of a leader of a movement, the organization he built, Turning Point USA, raised hundreds of millions of dollars last year and devoted it all to what are called in America get out the vote efforts. So going out, registering young people who wanted to vote Republican or centre-right or for President Trump, and actually making sure they got to the polls on polling day. That obviously is a kind of thing that the Democrats have always been famously good at. And he sort of leveled that playing field in a way that was decisive in the election. I think there are very few people who would say that, Donald Trump would not have won the popular vote last year without Charlie Kirk. And there's an argument he probably wouldn't have won the election at all without his support.
Charlie Kirk's assassination, what does it say about the whole democracy that is America at this point and how divisive it is?
Well, it doesn't say anything good, and I don't think it's limited to America. I mean, you are looking here at somebody who was killed for having the wrong opinions. You're looking at somebody who was shot. I mean, we're just a year removed from an attempt at assassinating President Trump himself. Obviously, on the other side of the aisle, there was the horrifying assassination of a politician, Democratic politician in Minnesota earlier this year. You go back 20-odd years, nearly 20 years to the shooting of Gabby Giffords. America is a country that is so radicalized and so polarized on deeply partisan lines that people seem entirely unable now to resolve their disputes democratically. I think, the whole point of politics, of course, is to resolve disputes without resorting to violence. That's why we have it. You abide by majority rule, people stand up and make their arguments, and ultimately the people vote and they decide which side is right. And if it gets to the point where people are standing up to make their arguments and they're being shot, well, then democracy itself is in real trouble. That's what I think. And I don't think it's an overestimation to say that. And I also don't think we should be in Ireland complacent enough to think that that is just something that happens in America. 3 years ago in 2022, the fringe right-wing party, the National Party, who don't have really any support in the country at all, but they held a political conference at the Lough Erne Resort in Fermanagh. And a busload of left-wing assailants arrived to that event and attacked them with hammers and other weapons. It was well documented in the news at the time. We've obviously had reports of violent threats being made against the Taoiseach. So, I mean, I don't think we're immune from it here either, Fran, to be honest.
In terms of Charlie Kirk now being martyred in some way, do you have concerns around that, John?
Well, of course. I mean, anybody should be concerned. I think when something like this happens, I mean, America is a country of, almost 400 million people with access to guns, right? It only takes one of those 400 million people to decide that they are going to avenge Charlie Kirk by, attacking some Democratic politician for this to escalate. So yeah, I think there's a real danger that, while the vast majority of people are sensible and level-headed, that when you get into this kind of tit-for-tat business of assassinations, that there's somebody out there who becomes so radicalized by this that they decide the only answer is more violence themselves. And I think that's how you get into a spiral. So I really do think it is time for people to take a long, hard look at the rhetoric they use. I mean, I saw last night on Blue Sky, which was supposed to be, of course, the more civilized alternative to Twitter, where all the far right live on Twitter and all the sensible people have migrated on social media to Blue Sky. I saw a UCD academic describing Charlie Kirk as a fascist. Now, if words are to mean anything, Fran, if words are to mean anything in our democracy, you can't have people using that kind of false language about their opponents. Charlie Kirk was many things. He was not a fascist. And I think that the language we use about each other, and particularly the language used by a lot of people who consider themselves sensible about anybody who disagrees with them to their political right, really needs to be looked at.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm sure you've had time to do so, to glance across the various newspapers this morning in terms of their coverage of this. Now, some of them were put to bed too early to cover it extensively, but they bought in articles. But largely it's pointing out Charlie Kirk and conspiracy theories. Charlie Kirk, all he had to say during the pandemic and the like, without looking at an overview of his place in American society, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, or without ever asking why somebody who said those things was so popular. I mean, one of the things that's baffling in this country is how close-minded we are to opposing views. I mean, I certainly didn't agree with everything Charlie Kirk said. I don't particularly agree with his support for Donald Trump, to be honest with you. I'm a conservative, but I'm not a huge Trump fan. I wouldn't have agreed with everything he said at all. But I think we so rarely listen to what people are saying that, it's almost treated in the Irish media as if, well, sure, only an imbecile could have listened to anything Charlie Kirk said. No, lots of really intelligent people were able to listen to him, follow the intelligence and the coherence of his arguments, and conclude that he was right. And I think in Ireland, one of the skills we have lost is the ability to listen to people with an opposing view and recognise the reason why their view is popular or the reason why their argument is cogent and coherent. And I think that the Irish media, present company accepted, is really bad at that. I think particularly there's a smugness when it comes to covering the United States. There's a smugness when it comes to, anything beyond the East Coast. Where people go hunting and they have guns, or they vote for Donald Trump, or they go to church on Sunday, that there's something backward about it, when there's nothing backward about it at all. So yeah, I think the Irish media is very, very guilty, in particular, of kind of othering people and pretending that perspectives that are very mainstream in the world outside of this island are somehow weird when they're not at all.
And you sometimes think that that's not reflective of the so-called ordinary people of Ireland and the conversations around our public houses and the like. Do you think that the media is not reflecting that?
Look, I think you only need to look at one issue to detect that. I mean, that is the issue of immigration. I mean, we have opinion polling in this country that shows that 75% of people broadly would agree with the statement that immigration into Ireland has been too high for too long. I think you go and listen to people who work in our media, who talk in our media for a living, and they're terrified to articulate that perspective. So it is almost, there is an unwillingness to engage in the conversations that ordinary people have up and down the country on a whole range of issues. There's obviously, for many years now, I've been policing of language. There's, another example would be the transgender issue that was referenced in the clips that Charlie Kirk, we played at Charlie Kirk before you came to me, where a lot of people feel like their own views are not being reflected in the conversations they hear on television or read in the newspapers. And there's a reason for that. And I think sometimes when somebody stands up and says, hang on a second, you're not mad if you believe this, or you're not far right if you think, the country should control its borders. I think that those views obviously become popular. And when they become too popular, clearly people are threatened by that. And instead of engaging in the argument, they resort to calling people fascists and saying that they're a danger to society, and then they end up getting shot. And I think the problem here is that what ultimately happened yesterday was that Charlie Kirk's speech was silenced. And I think the problem is that that is a logical extension, unfortunately, of what we already see in this country. When you look at the government proposing to censor social media or bring in hate speech laws, or determine who can get a platform in public debates, or who's allowed to run for president even. It is all about silencing people they don't agree with. And ultimately, the problem is that when that becomes the atmosphere that you should shut down disagreement, eventually somebody, if all else fails, somebody is going to take the ultimate step and try and shut you up permanently. And I think that's what happened to Charlie Kirk yesterday, and that's why I think the most important thing we can protect in our society is the freedom of people to speak their opinions, even if they're unpopular with you.
John, good to talk to you today, and we appreciate your time. Thank you. Good morning to you. That's John McGuirk there of Gript speaking to us.